Return to the axis. Sarah Batman has stated, given the lessons learned from the Mendy Memorial, ignoring the imperial axis seems to be an inadequate strategy in talking back to the hegemony of colonialism and the machinations of empire. A decolonial reimagining of the university must necessarily deal with the imperial axis itself. With the Rhodes plinth empty since 2015, the question remains as to what to place on it, assuming some kind of propositional as opposed to purely negating action is needed. An obvious move will be to relocate the Mendy Memorial and reposition it as center stage of campus life, replacing the arch imperialist with a somber reflection on the consequence of that imperial vision. This would also recover a lost memory of those killed, marginalized, or unacknowledged in the build up of whiteness and empire. Apart from the insensitive act of disturbing the dead, relocating the main memorial to the now empty pedestal of the Rhodes statue would, despite the hyperbolic and immediate symbolic elevation, arguably reiterate the spatial hierarchies of power from the previous regime and fall into line behind the warring imperial powers that sent these soldiers to their death in the first place. Indeed, just a few meters up from the now empty Rhodes statue pedestal is a sandstone plinth doing just that, commemorating those who lost their lives in the First World War. Ironically, the marginalizing of the history of the Mendy and the unacknowledged role of black South Africans in the terrible war has been made clear over the years with protest graffiti defacing the official First World War memorial plinth at various stages ranging from the ironic fuck white people to the more poignant remember Marikana, placing the memorial center stage of university life might literally expose it to similar abuse that recognizes the deplores the role of war in the building of empires. No matter who the soldiers were, in essence, the fall of Rhodes exaggerated the pedestal's characteristics as an altar set on an axis of power, and it is doubtful that any object or deity, no matter the genealogy or political origins, would survive such overexposure. Uh, However, given the renaming of Jameson Hall to Sarah Batman Hall, the figure of Sarah Batman as a figurehead representative of the abuse suffered by Khoikhoi or First People under colonialism might conceivably be a possible replacement for Roth. Sorry for that. Although the question of what form or representation this might take surfaces problematic issues related to the revival of figurative sculptures or memorials as opposed to more abstract representations. Batman was dehumanized and humiliated on a tour of Europe in the early 1800s and was dissected on her death with parts of her body and a plaster cast put on display at a museum of man in Paris. It is no wonder that, as part of the Fordist protest, a sculpture of Sarah Batman in the main library by black artist Willie Bester was covered in black cloth by protesters, with many more artworks being removed by the university administration in anticipation of further student action, ostensibly to protect the work, but also the sensibilities of the protesters. The action was motivated by what was seen to be a dehumanizing representation of Batman, made up of welded machine parts and metal, which was not the intention of the artist but rather to express her difference as something to be celebrated with a power of its own. As Bester notes, to cover it up is to do exactly what one had fought against. One had fought for everyone to be acceptable, you know, and it goes on and goes on. He did note and interprets the covering up as a continuation of the entangled body shaming or hypersexualization as the Hottentot Venus that Batman was originally subjected to. The point is that Bester's Batman was a challenging piece that demanded interaction and engagement, and yet her accompaniment of Rhodes into deep storage has now been achieved. Be that as it may, the revisionist undertakings of the Fordists and university administration fall short of literally tearing down the institution of the university and its buildings. And we are left with the Sarah Batman Memorial Hall and the still insistent imperial access as a marker of colonialism and its irrecoverable impact on the landscape. As the first section of this article laid out, the seated statue of Rhodes found its way onto the altar, largely not by design but rather through happenstance and fulfilling the call of the axis and its special demands through the idea of Rhodes as a misplaced deity established earlier in this article, and the removal of Rhodes from the pedestal along with the removal of Bester's Batman from the library. It is possible to anticipate the potential ensconcing of Sarah Batman as a literal sculpture deity withdrawn in the Sarah Batman Memorial Hall, or even taking Hami's place on the empty pedestal altar itself. If the Willie Bester sculpture was seen to continue the dehumanizing process she was subjected to, then it might be logically necessary that she be made the whole again in a more figurative representation, although it is unfathomable to think that such a lifelike representation would be made from the plaster cast made of her body or her death or from the other humiliation. Or other humiliation representations made of her at the time by colonialist and European scientists. While it may be problematic to speculate a future figuratively deity for the imperial axis, it seems, given the recent macabre appearance of a lifelike Nelson Mandela statue on the Cape Town City Hall balcony, where he gave his first speech on his freedom, that the drive to life like statues trumps more compelling or challenging memorials in the post-colonial, post-apartheid memorial scape. A similar set of recuperative ambitions were also found in the convoluted saga of statues of King Shaka in Durban, which saw the current Zulu king insisting on reworking of the Shaka statue in line with, colonialist representations of him. With the fracturing intrusion of colonialism and apartheid on everyday lives, there understandably seems to be a greater will to make things whole, to put fractured bodies literally back together again rather than developing a nuanced or challenging re-representation. Under these circumstances, it is not difficult to imagine the return of Sarah Batman or other victims of colonialism and apartheid as a lifelike sculpture, taking her place on the now empty pedestal altar and thereby reinscribing the power of the imperial axis and its monumentality.